Hi, I'm Alessandro Mautone, and yeah, bit of a personal introduction. I'm originally from Venezuela. You can see there my biggest passion, which is flying, so I do paragliding every now and then. And this brings me to the second point, which is what I do for a living. If you are into biking, then you might know this company. It's called Canyon. You can imagine from this picture, it's a racing bike company, so we do pretty cool bikes, as you can see. But we also have e-bikes, and that's where I and our team comes in. So we have an app where you can see where your bike is, the location, anti-theft, etc., etc. So yeah, that's enough for the personal introduction. Now let's dive into the talk itself, which is how to handle incident at scale. I like to start with a definition. There is this one that I found from SolarWinds, and I think it's pretty good. So it says, in the field of technology, an incident is typically defined as an unexpected event that disrupts business operational processes or reduces the quality of a service. This could include a service failure, service degradation, or server failure. So there are 2 points I want to highlight here, and it's about unexpected events and also about disruptions, because that's all that is about incidents. So this is, of course, from a software point of view, from a software company point of view. And we're going to see now now that we know what is an incident, what are the benefits of incident management. So the first one is that we can have proactive identification and prevention of major incidents. And we're going to see why later on. We can have consistent service levels thanks to that. And this is particularly important for those companies that provide what they call SLA, service level agreements. So, there are companies that are legally obliged to provide certain service and maintain a certain level of quality and reliability. So that's is going to help us with that as well. And then finally, transparency on ongoing issues. This is both towards the user and towards the company internally, and we're going to see why later. We focus mainly on internally here, so towards the company, but we're going to look into that later. So yeah, there are 3 phases that I personally identified whenever there is an incident. One is detection, another one is communication, and then the third one is resolution and prevention, which actually sounds like 2 points, and they are, but they're together, and we're going to see why once we get there. So let's start with the first one, which is detection. Yeah, we need to be able to understand when an incident is happening. So how do we do that? First of all, we need to define the level of issues we are handling. So, we can have different issues. We can have critical ones. Let's assume we have an e-commerce website, for example, where, you have users with accounts, profiles, you can view products, you can buy products, and so on. And at some point, the website is not reachable by any user. That's pretty clear that it's a critical incident, a critical issue, so we should trigger an incident there. While there are other issues that are minor and they should not trigger an incident because we shouldn't be always in incident mode. Since we are at DroidCon, let's assume we have an Android app and one of the buttons in the app, it's like partially visible. So sure, that's a poor user experience, but it's definitely not a critical incident because the user is still able to perform the actions they should. And so it shouldn't trigger an incident. It's something we want to fix, of course, but we don't have to do it right now. So now that we know how to classify incidents, we need a way to monitor them. There are many, many tools out there. I am mentioning only a few here. One I'm pretty sure is you're familiar with is Firebase. That's actually for analytics, but you have this thing called Crashalytics, and that's really a monitoring tool if you think about it, because it's going to monitor how many users have their app crashing. Another one is Datadog, which is extremely powerful, but it's also quite complex. You can even trace flows from the mobile client up to the server side, so the backend. There is Prometheus, which I believe it's open source, and there are others as well. We're not going to focus on how to implement those, but just to mention that you need one of those tools in order to monitor the stability of your app or your website or whatever it is. So now that we have a monitoring system, assuming we have a monitoring system in place, we need an alerting system. So as we said before, there are issues that are critical and issues that are not critical. And whenever we have a critical issue, we want to trigger something. We should define what are the metrics to monitor. So let's assume, for example, well, a good one is the crash rate in the apps that comes for free, usually with Crashlytics. But it can also be defining a threshold for critical versus not. So again, let's assume our e-commerce website or app, doesn't matter. We have many API calls there, as you can imagine. When you view a product, you buy a product, etc., everything is an API call to the server, to the backend. And we want to have 98% of those API calls always to be successful. So we can place a monitoring pipeline there, and then whenever the threshold is met, so we go below 98%, we trigger an alert. And what is an alert? It can be as simple as sending a message in the communication system in our company. So, can be Slack, can be Teams, can even be emails. Again, if we go back to Firebase, you're going to get an email whenever your crash rate is going up too fast. So what do we do when an alert is triggered then? We can be either like the guy where the fire is and act like if everything is going to be fixed by itself later, magically, or we can be prepared. This is actually a pretty interesting situation. You can think about this also, emergency workers, for example. When there is a fire, let's consider firefighters. They don't go running, and screaming desperately and bumping into each other. They have established procedures they can follow, and that are going to help in fixing the issue and having smooth operations. So we want to mimic something similar, basically. So we addressed how to monitor. We mentioned how we can create alert. We defined what is critical and what is not. And now we are in incident mode. So let's assume an incident was triggered and we have an alert in our chat system or whatever. What do we do here? We usually create a incident response team. That sounds a big thing, but it's actually pretty smooth. Usually it's composed by two elements, a debugger or multiple debuggers, and an incident communicator. So a debugger or multiple debuggers is usually the people who is going to investigate the issue and eventually solve it, or is going to delegate it to the relevant team. Because if you're in a big company, again, the e-commerce example, you can have a payments team, you can have a account team, and so on. And maybe the account team starts the investigation based on the information they have, and then they find out it's actually an issue in the payment system, so they can forward it to the payment team. The incident communicator, we're going to see that in a moment, but I want to stress the distinction here. This can look like an overhead, but it's pretty important. And to understand this, let's use another example, two of them. So the first one, let's assume we are in a small company. So we are 10 people, and you are the only developer, you have your boss, and then an incident happens. And your boss is constantly asking you, hey, is it fixed? What is going on? Etc., etc. This is manageable. You need some level of Zen. Maybe you need to practice yoga weekly or something, but it's manageable. But now let's assume another example. You are in a big company, 400 people, 1,000 people. You have many teams, like we said, and each team has multiple managers. And then an incident happens, and you get asked the same question multiplied by X. That can be really not only stressing, but can disrupt your work because you either focus on answering those questions or you focus on fixing the issue. So that's why we have this distinction. And we are going to look deeper into it now. We covered the detection flow, and we're going to now focus on the communication one, so the communicator role that we just mentioned. What does this communicator role look like? So they usually give periodic updates, and they are the single source of truth. So the reason we give periodic updates is hopefully to prevent, that situation where we constantly get answers. I'm not guaranteeing you're gonna fix that, but it's gonna help. And the single source of truth means that within the company, everyone should know that this is the person we should ask information to. So we are not going to bother, the debugger team, which is part of the incident response, but we're going to deal with the incident communicator. Where do we communicate? This requires a bit of education within the company. It's not something you do from one day to another. But yeah, I think this process works very well. So usually you have a specific channel for incident communication. Again, it can be as simple as a channel in Slack or Teams or whatever system you use. Preferably, it's used only for critical incidents. So this is also pretty important because whenever you see a notification there, you know you need to kind of give priority to that. And you also know that something is going on, something bad probably. While whenever there are no notifications, you know everything is quiet, everything is going smooth, and we can continue with our life. And also something I saw working very well is a second channel for the incident discussion. So you can imagine that if you have a debugger team, they have to discuss what is going on. They need to communicate between each other. And if you do it in the main channel, it's going to get polluted with a lot of notifications, a lot of information, and there is going to be people always asking what is going on. So this second channel can be used by, let's say, more technical people. And the incident communicator can also be there so that they can understand what is going on and then, process the information and express it in a better way in the main channel. What do we communicate? That's also something that you can define, and it's going to help you in have consistent messaging and hopefully clear. So usually we communicate the impact of the incident. So let's go back to the e-commerce website. An example can be all the US customers are not able to reach the website. So I'm clearly communicating the impact of the incident we're having. What are the steps taken to address it? So you can say, for example, we identified we did a deploy at 9 a.m. and the incident got triggered at 9:10 a.m. So we believe that deploy is the cause, and we're going to roll back. And then finally, also the next update timeline. This is also a very little thing that can help a lot. And it's about, for example, saying next update is going to be within 15 minutes or 30 minutes. Hopefully, the people on the other side are going to read that, and they know that if there is no communication for the next 15 minutes, it's fine because we're working on it. And they also know that the message is going to come latest at 30 or 15 minutes, whatever we said. So it helps managing expectations, which is also pretty nice. And then I put this as optional because this is customer facing and we're mainly focusing on the company side communication. But I strongly believe on this one. And it's about communicating to customers. So whenever there is an incident, it's really good practice to communicate to customers. There are a few examples there. There is Bitbucket and GitHub. So I'm pretty sure you also, if you work with one of those tools, whenever you open a PR and there is an incident going on, there is a little banner telling you, hey, something is not working. We're all happy because we get a free day off. But those companies, they even go one step further because they have a status page, as you can see. That is always reachable, and you can see the status of each service. So this is pretty cool. And I think some of them even have an history of all the incidents, so you can even see that. Since we are at DroidCon, there is also a screenshot about a mobile Android app that I like a lot. It's the one from Garmin. And there also they show a little banner telling the user that we know there is something going on, we're aware of it, so please check back later. This is also nice because, again, helps managing expectations and also hopefully the user is not going to be like me clicking sync all the time and bringing down other services that are still working. So yes, we covered communication as well now. And now we're going to go through the last phase, which is resolution and prevention. So let's assume now the issue is identified. We saw how to set up a monitoring system, how to get alerts, how to communicate about it with a bucket, etc. And now we identified the issue. There are multiple ways you can solve an issue, of course, but these are the two main ways that usually you can go for. The first one is rolling back any changes that were done recently and clearly match the timing of the incident. This is something we mentioned earlier. or you can apply a hotfix and deploy it as soon as possible. I personally prefer the first one because usually when you are in incident mode, you already have the pressure of having to fix the issue. So that can lead to more mistakes if you go for the hotfix. But it's also true that, especially with mobile, you have a review process, etc. So rolling back is not that quick. And also there are cases, for example, where you release something and a migration is involved and it's not possible to simply roll back. So in those cases, yeah, we need to go for a hotfix and hopefully we do the right thing. So we release what we believe is a fix. And in this case, what we need to do is still continue to actively monitor the metrics to make sure that they are back to normal. So if you remember the 98% example for the API success rate, maybe was down to 80%. We release a fix, and now we need to monitor that it goes slowly back to the threshold, hopefully to 100%. And if the issue is not solved, then we need to go back to the previous step. So we still have an incident response team, we still have the debuggers, and we still continue the investigation, and we start all over. Postmortem. This one is very important, and that's the one I put together with the incident. So if you notice that I didn't say the incident it's closed yet, even if we assume the issue is solved and the fix is released, because we do need a postmortem. This is a very good practice. A lot of companies do. And it's just a document basically that analyzes what happened. So there are three main sections in this document. You can structure it as you want. We're going to see a couple of examples later. But the main points are analyze the incident. So we analyze what went wrong and why it happened. Then we assess the effectiveness of the response. For example, we ask ourselves if the response took too long, if it could have been faster, or if it was fast enough. And then finally, also that steps to prevent this in the future. So let's assume again we are a mobile client and out of nowhere the app starts crashing, even if we didn't do any release. We start investigating and we notice that the backend response changed for some reason. So the backend basically did a deploy, which broke the contract between the mobile clients and the response API, and that caused the app to crash. What steps can we take here to prevent this in the future? Something we could do, for example, is introducing versioning. So whenever a backend introduces a new model, they can create a new version, and this will make sure that existing clients will not break. Something I want to stress about this postmortem is that this is not to blame anyone, but it's mainly to indeed prevent the incident from happening again. And also to keep accountability, because if we don't have that, then it could be easy to push this under the carpet and forget about it. So, and it's going to serve also as documentation and history on how to prevent this. Now that we created a postmortem document, we can finally declare the incident closed. I stressed about that because if you declare the incident closed before creating the postmortem, there is a high chance the postmortem is not going to get created. So if you really want that, you should make it part of the process of fixing the incident. Finally, we have some postmortem examples. There is a real life example from GitLab where they had a database outage at some point. That's a really good one you can read. And there is also a template from Atlassian. It's very rich, so maybe you don't need all the things that are there, but you can use it as a base to create a template within your company. We went over the three phases now, so we know how to detect, to communicate, and finally solve and prevent incidents, hopefully. And this is it. Thank you.